Welcome to 3 Pro TV. I'm your host, Yuan Park. Today we're joined by Parker White, CIO and COO of DeFi Development, one of the most talked about DApps in the blockchain ecosystem. While most watch Bitcoin or Ethereum, this company is pioneering a different path, building its entire treasury around Solana. Today we get the inside story of that vision, so please join me in welcoming Parker White, the CIO and COO of DFDV. Welcome, Parker White.
Thanks for having me.
So many of our audiences would have already followed your story closely, but there's nothing quite like listening through your lens. So would you like to introduce yourself to our audiences?
Sure. Yeah, so as you mentioned, Parker White, I am one of the co-founders of DFDV, DeFi Development Corp. And we launched back in early April. So we were actually the first non-Bitcoin DATs. I know DATs have become a big thing lately, and the word DATs circulating. But when we started, there was no such thing as a DAT per se. We were telling people we were the MicroStrategy of Solana, and it was actually kind of hard to raise money because nobody, like no crypto investor or venture investor, had invested in one of these vehicles before. It had just been MicroStrategy for the most part. And so myself and a team of former Krakenites, so all of us from Kraken, Joseph was the chief strategy officer at Kraken. He's our CEO and chairman. Myself, I was at Kraken for 6 years, a number of other folks on the team, DK and so on that many of you guys have seen. We got together back in February, and it took us about, it was a little under 3 months to find the initial vehicle, Janover, a real estate fintech platform. And then we did a change of control where we, bought a controlling interest in the company and raised money into the vehicle and began executing on the Treasury strategy. But, candidly, there was no playbook. We were kind of writing the playbook as we went. So we've done quite a few firsts because there was really nobody to follow. And we did choose to build on Solana because we think Solana is, after Bitcoin, the most important blockchain network. And so yeah, that's a little bit about what we've done.
Wonderful. So you're known as the Bitcoin believer. What was the moment or event that very first convinced you to the crypto world?
Yeah, so I got into crypto back in 2017 and really started to understand more deeply what Bitcoin was about in 2018. I kind of come from a bit of an Austrian economics background, so growing up, reading lots of books. I actually read F.A. Hayek's Road to Serfdom when I was 12 years old.
12 years old?
That's right. And so kind of from an early age, my dad was like feeding me all this Austrian libertarian stuff. And so once I really understood that Bitcoin is kind of the culmination of what the Austrians were trying to find or build, they didn't really have a good idea of what it would be after the global monetary system moved off the gold standard. And so once I really understood that Bitcoin was kind of that solution, it all really clicked and made sense. And so I spent a lot of time building on Bitcoin. I was at Kraken, but I've also done a lot of, kind of angel investing and that kind of thing. But so I think Bitcoin is a really solid money. But expanding beyond that and what we've seen over the last, since crypto, since Bitcoin launched back in 2009, we've unfortunately seen a lot of centralized players cause problems. So whether that was Mt. Gox or FTX or BlockFi, in the last cycle, a bunch of centralized players blew up. And you can't really have decentralized finance built on Bitcoin. It doesn't work, which is fine. Bitcoin is good money. It's a good store of value. But if we don't have DeFi, then we are left with the banks and ETFs and other centralized financial institutions like exchanges being the venue for transacting with Bitcoin. And so that doesn't, Bitcoin solves one problem, but then you have all these other problems, and we can see that Bitcoin alone doesn't fix it, right? We had the FTXs and the BlockFis of the world. And so that's really when, I started getting into Solana back in 2021 and really dove in more deeply back in 2022. But it became clear that Solana was the solution to kind of this DeFi opportunity or problem, this lack of venues for using Bitcoin, stablecoins, and other assets in a decentralized, trustless manner. And so as I've been really building on Solana, Bitcoin's great, love Bitcoin, but there's a whole financial ecosystem, and you can really rebuild finance using blockchains, using particularly Solana as the best one. And so that's kind of what we're doing.
So now I want to deep dive into the story of DFDV. Could you take us back to the beginning? I know Joseph, your CEO, you both worked at Kraken for a long time. How did you start the business, and what was the key turning point that prompted the shift to Solana-focused treasury model?
We'd seen obviously what MicroStrategy had done. I'd been following the Bitcoin miners for a while, and they kind of sort of did a treasury type strategy as well. And so we, again, back in February, got together and started discussing this idea. And, I think a hallmark of our team is a real kind of don't wait attitude.
Oh.
Just go for it. And so, the story I like to share was I shared a strategy document, 2 or 3 page strategy document with Joseph on a Thursday. I was like, hey, we need to, do you want to do this? It seems interesting. And it was that following Sunday, I believe it was, that he met Blake Janover, who had the Janover company.
Yeah.
And so it was only a couple days from having the idea to starting to work on the public vehicle. Wow. And so I know it wasn't the standard process for going public, but I believe the number is 83 days that we went from idea to going public, which is pretty fast. And so that's kind of been the hallmark of, basically our team is just go as fast as possible and continue to iterate and innovate quickly. And so, that's kind of a little bit how we started. And I believe it was maybe a week after Joseph and I first talked that we went to John, our CFO, and we'd worked with him at Kraken before. And he was at another project, and we called him up. We're like, hey, John, we got this idea. And actually the the thing that I told him was, I got on the call. I was like, hey, John, what's up? Had talked in a little while. I was like, so John, do you like money? And he was like, yes, I'm in. Let's go.
Everyone loves money.
Yeah. And so I think within 30 minutes, we had our CFO, and he's been with us, from the very beginning. And so we kind of picked up other Krakenites along the way. But pretty much everyone that we've talked to has been super enthusiastic about joining us. And it's been a pretty wild ride.
Wow, that is so fast. So up to now, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. So is it fair to describe DFDV as a micro strategy for Solana, applying their playbook but choosing to focus on Solana instead of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I would say we took the MicroStrategy playbook and we've really expanded on it. And so with Bitcoin, it just kind of sits there, right?
Yeah.
And so MicroStrategy basically buys Bitcoin. They use their financial engineering or their financing strategies, whether that's the ATM, convertible bonds, preferred shares, that kind of thing, to raise money to buy Bitcoin and then just repeat that cycle. But with Solana, there's a lot more you can do with the asset. So we run validators in-house and we stake to our own validators. We also get third-party delegation to our validators. But then there's a bunch of DeFi things that we can do as well. So we've partnered with, many of you may know Fragmetric, but we've partnered with, Camino and Drift and Exponent and a bunch of projects across the Solana ecosystem to help us generate additional yield. So historically, we've generated about 10% yield on our balance sheet.
Yeah.
People will notice that is higher than the standard staking rate. And that's because of all these things that we can do on chain to essentially activate the asset and make it a productive asset. So whereas Bitcoin generates zero yield, has zero earnings, zero free cash flow, it just sits there. MicroStrategy is truly a treasury company. We're actually an operating company. We have net income, we have cash flows, we have revenue. When people look at the balance sheet, you can value our business on PE ratios, on price revenue ratios. You can do these things because Solana is a productive asset. And so while we are in some ways similar to MicroStrategy for Solana, I'd say the playbook is much larger and the number of things we can do is much larger. And it makes, in my view, our business much more interesting than, say, at MicroStrategy, although we do love MicroStrategy, of course.
Wow. So on that note, I'm just curious, how much Solana have DFDV accumulated so far?
Yeah, so at the time of this interview releasing, we'll have roughly 2.2 million Solana on the balance sheet. And
2.2 million.
That's right.
Is that the most company that has the most Solana?
There's one larger, but we are the largest market cap, or highest liquidity, highest volume vehicle out there.
This is $1 million question, and it's kind of something similar to what you just answered, but why the bet on Solana? I mean, there's like countless options out there instead of Bitcoin, Ethereum. What did you see in Solana that made you think this is the one?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I mentioned earlier, we were the first non-Bitcoin DAT.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the logical choice would have been to pick Ethereum, right? Second largest asset. We're the non-Bitcoin DAT. But we chose Solana. And there was another DAT that launched, also Solana, before the first Ethereum DAT came out. And so, I think people that are in crypto really understand that Solana is where a lot of the innovation is occurring. Solana has the scale to truly be a global financial network, and doesn't have a lot of the scaling challenges that Ethereum has. But Solana also has the scale and developer activity and user base and liquidity and all these metrics that we care about that many smaller networks just don't have. So it kind of sits in this sweet spot of technological innovation and development, but then also user activity and liquidity and all these things. And so you bring these two things together, and we think Solana has significant upside, both Solana the asset, but then Solana the network and the ecosystem.
Oh.
And so then if you look at the relative, market caps and prices of the two assets, Solana versus Ethereum, there's significant upside on a relative basis for Solana. And so, if we believe crypto is a horse race, then we want to back the fastest horse and build our business on the fastest horse. And we think Solana is the fastest horse.
I want to ask about the engine and the fuel of the company. So who are the key investors that helped the fuel journey up until this point? And how do you intend to raise the capital for accumulating Solana in the future as well?
Yeah, so we started out, Kraken was kind of the first investor. Mm-hmm. So Joseph, he was at Kraken for a little over 8 years before he left. He sent a text to Jesse Powell and was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And Jesse's like, where do I send the money? So that was great to have that backing from the, former Kraken team. And then Arrington was very early in supporting us. And then it was Pantera that kind of came in and helped us get over the line and, wrote the biggest check. And so it was really those three investors and then a pretty large group of angels and smaller VCs. But those three were, the 90% anchors. And they've gone on to, really support the data ecosystem in a massive way. And so we were kind of their first big bet, which is pretty cool.
You have a strong base.
I guess so.
Okay, let me give you a challenge now. So you're in an elevator with an investor who is bullish on Solana, which is me. And I ask you in the elevator, why should I buy your stock instead of just buying Solana instead? What would your pitch be in that short period of time?
Yeah, so we've actually got a well-rehearsed 3-word answer, and that is Solana on steroids.
Oh.
So just like MicroStrategy has outperformed Solana long-term, our goal is to MicroStrategy has outperformed Bitcoin long-term. I believe it's maybe 3x. I don't know the exact number, but since they started, they've outperformed Bitcoin significantly. We want to try to do the same.
Oh.
And so we can, as I mentioned earlier, generate yield. We can do all this activity, but our goal is to generate more yield on our Solana base and grow Solana per share. That's our key North Star metric, grow Solana per share faster than any other vehicle out there. So we grow Solana per share faster than ETFs, faster than doing it yourself, all these other options. And so if you're a long-term believer in Solana, and you think we know what we're doing, maybe we don't, I think we do, then, betting on a management team to use that Solana productively is better than maybe betting on yourself or betting on an ETF, which is just going to have it sit there.
I know there's a premium cost if we invest in DFDV instead of Solana itself. So what's the value you add beyond the coin itself? Why should investors pay for that premium cost as well?
Sure. So that premium will fluctuate, right? And right now it's actually fairly close to 1x NAV. So you're basically paying close to the value of the Solana. At times, for example, back in May, it was quite a bit higher. And so, there's kind of a bit of a relative value when you want to get in based on what that MNAV is. But ultimately, what you're paying for is the future growth. So an example I'll give is if you went and bought, say, a tech company, you went and bought OpenAI, you wouldn't value the company based on book value, right? You wouldn't say, well, what's the total value of their GPUs? They've got, I don't know the number, $20 billion for the GPU, so I'm only willing to pay $20 billion for the company. No, that's silly. You buy tech companies based on earnings, based on revenue, based on their ability to use that asset productively and use that asset better than anyone else. So anyone can buy Solana, but we believe that we can utilize it productively better than anybody else. And so we think long-term, our business will be valued not on a MNAV basis, not on a ratio to our assets, not on price to book. Effectively, it's what's going on. We think our business will be valued more like a tech business where people look at earnings, people look at revenue, people look on free cash flow and return on equity and these other metrics that are used to value tech businesses, not just a pot of assets. Because ultimately, we're not just a pot of assets. We are utilizing these assets to generate, profits and grow the ecosystem.
You're doing such a lot of things inside. When you're buying large quantities of assets, the biggest challenge is not to leave any footprints in order to not drive up the price. What is your approach to this?
Yeah, so we can execute. We can buy on a number of venues. We're all traders by background, and so we don't just use OTC desks. In fact, we primarily don't use OTC desks. We actually work the order books directly ourselves. And so that helps us to build positions. We'll sometimes execute on DeFi, whether that's, on public AMMs or private AMMs have become a big thing recently. And so we can kind of source liquidity where it is and spread out our purchases to, minimize our footprint, minimize our impact on the price. But ultimately, we are a big buyer, and we like to think that us buying lots of Solana may cause the price to go up over time. It's just we want to avoid, short-term impacts.
So let's zoom out and talk a bit about the big picture of Solana. So what's your ultimate role you want DFDV to play in the future of the blockchain ecosystem?
Yeah, so ultimately, I've been in crypto for quite a while, since 2017. Joseph, he was actually the CEO of the first Canadian Bitcoin exchange back in 2013.
2013. Wow.
And so we're here for the long term. We're here for the mission of crypto, which is to build a new monetary system, a new financial system, one based on good money, Bitcoin, but then built above that, on top of that, to basically export property rights and freedom, human liberties, human rights to the whole world. And so that's why we're here. We think this is an excellent next step in that journey for many of us. And so the role of DFDV is really to serve as a bridge. So we got the bridge logo here. And so bridging TradFi and DeFi. And our hope, our mission is that ultimately there's not TradFi and DeFi, it's just finance, right? And so our stated purpose when we were starting this out was to be that bridge and to bring TradFi capital into DeFi and DeFi returns into TradFi. And so there's lots of different vehicles that people can access DeFi from a more TradFi setup. So whether that's, ETFs or there's, private funds out there. But we think we're a pretty unique take on that bridge, if you will, that ultimately, if we can bring more capital from TradFi into DeFi, we can help grow that ecosystem. We can make it more liquid and accessible for larger and larger players. And we can help onboard the next, billion users into crypto to ultimately, achieve that overarching mission that we set out to do.
Your hat has it has a wording. What's the DeFi's value?
So this was a play on, of course, the whole GameStop and Roaring Kitty, right? His Reddit handle. But we're we think the value of DeFi, I think I've said this over and over, but the value of DeFi is the open access. And anyone, anywhere in the world with an internet connection gets access to first-rate finance. And so, we've borrowed a little bit of stables on chain, and we have a borrow rate, and everybody has the exact same borrow rate. So we're a large NASDAQ company, and we're borrowing at the exact same rate as, my mom can borrow at for, $50 or $100. That's not the case in traditional finance, right? If you are a larger company, you have access to prime brokers, you have these special deals, you get special rates, you get special treatment relative to the average person. And that's not the way it should be. Everybody should be on an even playing field. And so that's the value that DeFi brings, is that open access, that even playing field for everyone anywhere in the world, which is, I think, pretty exciting.
Wow. Now, as I listen to you, I want to buy DeFi DV stocks.
Okay.
So I just pulled up some charts, and as I was looking into it, beginning on September 16th until October 15th, so for about a month, DFDV declined approximately 18%, and Solana experienced a smaller decline, approximately 14% over the same period. So considering the stock's recent volatility, some might argue that the investment appeal of DFDV is decreasing. What would you say to this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when you look at our business, there's basically two components. There's going to be the volatility of the underlying asset. And so when Solana goes down 10%, our balance sheet goes down, 10% in value. But then there's that premium on top, and that can also fluctuate. So if you go back further, back in May, our premium was much higher. And so ultimately, that's where the leverage and kind of increased volatility comes in. Typically what you see, and just looking at MicroStrategy, is that when the underlying asset is going up, the premium is also expanding. That's typically what happens there. But then on the downside, typically when the asset is going down, the premium also contracts. And so that creates extra volatility. Now, traders love the volatility, right?
They do.
And, I'd say one interesting aspect is there was the recent, big flash crash, effectively, this giant liquidation event. And so some traders get leverage themselves, but, they can get liquidated, right? The vast majority of our balance sheet leverage through the convertible bonds is unsecured. So we cannot get liquidated. With those, with that debt. And so, we weren't liquidated during the flash crash. And so in many ways, we believe that, DFDV provides I would say a safer access to leverage. You could argue maybe, it's different, right? But we don't have that kind of flash crash liquidation type risk with the majority of our debt. And so, you probably will see this, DFDV have a much higher level of volatility than the Solana, the underlying, which, a lot of traders like, right? Traders are here to trade assets that move around. It means much higher volatility on the options. So if you want to do some kind of income strategy or volatility strategy with options, and we have weekly options that people can trade. And so, I expect the stock to be volatile, and that's kind of the way we want it.
Okay, so talking about volatility, it's important to earn money, but also it's important to keep the money. So what have you learned from MicroStrategy or Sailor or others about how to handle the inevitability of the bear markets?
As I mentioned, Joseph getting into crypto back in 2013, myself in 2017, we've been through a number of bear markets. In fact, collectively as a team, we've been through more bear markets than any other DAT by a large margin, right? We're a crypto native team. We've been through a number of bear markets at Kraken. Joseph saw the bear market of 2015 and 2016, which that wasn't a bear market. That was people were questioning if this thing would continue, right? That was much more dire straits. And so we want to build our business around long-term resiliency. In fact, we've said this from the very beginning that the winners in the DAT space will not be determined during the bull market. They'll be determined during the bear market.
Yeah.
So your ability to survive a bear market is critical for any crypto business, right? That's kind of where you earn your stripes. That's where you basically prove to the market that you're not going to go away, that you're here, that you're committed. And so what does it mean for us? Well, minimizing the usage of secured debt so that we don't have a margin call if the price of Solana collapses at, say, 80%. Generating organic growth, organic yield. So this is what I've talked about over and over is the kind of the DeFi strategies, the running the validators, that kind of thing. So that we can generate free cash flow from the asset, excluding any capital markets activity, right? So if a MicroStrategy is down and they can't raise capital, they just sit there and wait. And they hopefully have a cash reserve and they just cover operational expenses with their cash reserve. For us, even in a bear market, we still generate cash flow, we still generate revenue. And so that helps kind of dampen that downside because we, again, are an actual operating business and we can cover OpEx out of revenue and free cash flow. And so that's kind of how we build for the bear market. And, ultimately our goal is to be here through multiple cycles and create a business that really stands the test of time and has a lot of lasting trust from, all traditional investors out there.
How do you see the target price up until end of 2025 of Solana? Right?
Oh, yeah. We bought the website domain Solana to 10K.
Oh.
So we believe long-term Solana is going to 10,000. Mm-hmm. 10,000 we actually believe is the floor. I've said this a few times. And that's because when global finance moves onto Solana, the total value that the network is providing is massive. It's many, many orders of magnitude larger than it is today. And so I think it's important for people to kind of anchor to that long-term vision of why are we here? What are we doing? It's not just create a cryptocurrency or something. It's no, we're trying to revolutionize and rebuild global finance. So if the entire banking system of the whole world, all the exchanges, all credit markets, if everything is built on Solana, then the value of the network and therefore the value of the asset, we think can go much, much higher. Now, in the short term, in 2025, anything can happen, right? I mean, who would have thought that back in January, Trump would have launched his meme coin on Solana?
Yeah.
And so anything can happen in the short term. You can have flash crashes like we had very recently where the price went below 200, but you could have something pretty crazy happen and you could see it shoot up to 300, 500, 1,000. I mean, it's really tough to say in the short term. We're really anchored on that long term of, sold to 10K. Mm-hmm. And how can we accumulate as much Solana now? Because obviously it's not at 10K today.
Yeah.
And so how can we accumulate as much now so that when it is at 10K, our balance sheet is very healthy.
You have a baby coming out soon.
That's right.
It's 5 months now.
That's right.
So when is it a boy or a girl?
It's going to be a girl.
If she comes out, would you buy her MicroStrategy, DFDV, Bitcoin? Out of these three, would you buy all three of them or just MicroStrategy and DFDV or just DFDV?
It's a good question. We love Tom Lee. Tom Lee's great, but I'm not super bullish on Ethereum right now. Mm-hmm. They've got a lot of challenges to work through from a scaling perspective. Yeah. So I'd probably just buy some MicroStrategy and DFDV. Oh. And maybe that'll change in the future. The Ethereum community is really building and trying to kind of fix some of their scaling issues. But for now, I'm sticking with Bitcoin and Solana.
Is DFDV more volatile than MicroStrategy?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, that's why you're buying both of them?
I believe in Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin, Saylor talks about Bitcoin going to 1 million. I think that's going to happen. And so, Bitcoin is global money and I want access to global money.
So as we close, I'd like to ask for a final question and final message that you would like to give to investors.
Yeah. So what we're building is very community oriented. Mm-hmm. And so we try to be super active in the community, whether that's through our regular Twitter spaces or Reddit AMAs, all the different things that we're doing. And so we love the feedback from people sharing, hey, you should do more of this. You should stop doing this. We recently did this warrant dividend. And so the feedback from the community on that was really helpful. Hey, do you like the warrant dividend? Or do you, not want to see more of that kind of thing? And so, while we are raising money sometimes we raise money from, hedge funds and other more institutional investors, primarily we are building for the everyday average person, right? Retail investors, people like myself. Mm-hmm. And that's what, MicroStrategy has done. And that's what we're doing. And so that constant feedback from the community, people sharing their thoughts with us, both good and bad, is really helpful for us to design the company and the financial products that we launch, whether that's the common stock, preferred stock, bonds, these kind of things. It helps us to design those products for the people that are using them most, which is the average everyday investor. And so I would just ask that, people come talk to us, reach out, join the Twitter Spaces, give us feedback, and we are listening and building a business that really takes into account the whole community.
Thank you so much for taking your time, Parker, and we wish the best luck, and we will be watching your progress closely.
Thanks for having me.